Surprisingly, this organization has not been affected in any way by the conflicts between individual states. And I think we have resolved most of them along the way without necessarily involving the regional organization. For instance, a couple of years ago, we had border issues with Uganda. And then, the problems were solved. I remember I had closed borders and things like that. But we did not in any way halt the cooperation at regional level in the East African Standby Force. We continued pledging our forces and participating in collective security initiatives. Same with Burundi. It has been quite consistent. Both countries have been quite consistent in, participating in both military, police, and civilian engagements. And like I said, our readiness has never been put to question throughout our 23 years of existence. We have always been united for a collective purpose. I would certainly say it is much safer. If we look at individual state stability, Rwanda, for instance, Rwanda is much safer than it was before. Not because of the EASF, but because of our collective support and engagements in bringing peace and stability. I told you that it's not just about intervention in times of conflict. Even the preventive measures, sharing intelligence, being able to understand each other's scenarios, working together, both as, by the way, we are a multidimensional force, working together as the military, police, and civilian components to create stability in the region through dialogue, through conferences, through continuous engagement as a region. I think we have, I can say to a large extent that we have created stability.
Hello, you're welcome to The Context by the New Times. It is an interactive conversation that we're going to have on this day, and this one is going to be looking at the broader region, Eastern African region. And when we talk of Eastern African region, it is bigger than just East Africa, because we're going to be talking about a subject that concerns around 10 countries across the region, right from the Horn all the way down to Burundi. And obviously today we are honored to be with a gentleman that is known in Rwanda and across the region in the military circles. And this is none other than Brigadier General Ronald Rwivanga. Brigadier General Rwivanga, we are honored to host you on The Context. You're most welcome.
Thank you for having me.
And let me also add that it is the first time that we're having, of course, a virtual conversation on our podcast. You're in Nairobi. And as Nairobi has been freezing, it's been winter. Makes me think that you have sent all the sun to Kigali. But we're enjoying it. I hope you're enjoying the weather in Nairobi as well.
We're enjoying it. If it gets cold, we just need to put on our coats and get ready for it.
Yeah. And General, let me start by congratulating you on your recent assumption of your new role as director of the East African Standby Force with headquarters in Nairobi. Of course, having spent some good years, maybe around 6, if I'm not mistaken, serving as the spokesperson of Rwanda Defence Forces. Congratulations on your new role. And also, congratulations on your completion of service as the RDF spokesperson.
Thank you very much.
Now, to get started, of course, our audience will be wondering, what is this East African Standby Force about? Do you have a standby force? Are you going to deploy any forces? What are you going to be doing in Nairobi?
First of all, this organization, the Eastern African Standby Force, was established in 2004. That's about 23 years ago. by countries of the Eastern African region, 10 countries, as part of the African Union's initiative to create the African Standby Force. So today, the East African Standby Force serves as one of African Union's 5 regional standby arrangements, mandated to support peace support operations, conflict prevention, crisis response, and post-conflict reconstruction in the Eastern African region. Now we are mandated basically to promote peace, security, and stability in the Eastern African region. So we basically envisioned a region that is capable of responding on call to conflicts through African-led solutions, while supporting in conflict prevention, peace support operations, and humanitarian assistance in scenarios where a country needs collective support from its member states. So yeah, so that was the rationale behind establishing this organization in 2004. And I must say we have achieved a lot. The organization has achieved a lot. There is a tendency for people to think that the organization has to be involved in military interventions, just like the UN forces are.
Because you're a standby force general.
Yes, standby forces are supposed to be standby to respond when the need arises. I'll give you an instance, an example in history. The NATO was established in 1949 as a standby force. It deployed in 1995 for the very first time, 46 years. But between 1949 and 1995, it had to reach full operational capability. It had to achieve interoperability between its member states. We had to carry out doctrinal compliance between the nations. They had to do training, joint training exercises, command post and field training exercises in order for each of those member states to be able to operate effectively together to respond to different scenarios. So this is what we have been doing for the last 23 years.
And if you are to go by the example you just gave, does that mean that we are likely to have another 23 years before an actual deployment can be done, actually?
It is often said, and rightly so, that the best generals are those who can win without necessarily going to war. So we have different scenarios in which we respond. So we don't have to go to war, we don't have to respond to crisis. If we don't have crisis in the region, then we are okay. We don't have to put our forces to use. And for that matter, therefore, we must be ready for the worst case scenario, which I think is one of the examples we had was the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi, which is a scenario which ideally such a force should be deployed in. But the fact that we haven't deployed does not mean we are not ready to. There's a difference. And one thing I must tell you is that as individual states, and here we're talking about Rwanda, we're talking about Burundi, we're talking about Uganda, Kenya, we're talking about Sudan, Somalia, we're talking about Djibouti, Ethiopia, and then Comoros, which is the 9th country. All these countries, in one way or another, have been engaged either independently or as bilateral entities or as multilateral entities in operations in AMISOM, Somalia. With Rwanda, it is Ansar al-Sunna wa Jamaa in Mozambique or Central African Republic, or Sudan, which is a member state. Burundi has also been involved in AMISOM. So, as individual states, countries have in one way or another participated in interventions.
You're seeing these as building blocks.
These are building blocks. Excellent. Building blocks.
Yeah.
In other words, if you want to test the individual state capacity ability to respond to crisis, then we have a testing ground on which each of our states was tested. What we need is to use exercises and scenarios to bring our respective states and armies together to show that we can respond together. And we have done that through command post exercises, field training exercises, maritime exercises in Djibouti and along the coast. We have done so many of those exercises. So the best way to prove or to test the hypothesis is to put it to a test, and we have done that. But again, if you want to see if we are capable of responding, then we have many examples of how our individual states have done.
If I may interject there and I ask that, what is your model or what are you envisaging? How do you intend to mobilize this force? Are you going to have like a standby force, as the naming suggests, stationed somewhere? Are you going to have forces stationed in their home countries and ready for intervention in the shortest time possible? Have you reached that stage yet?
Yes, in 2014 we achieved full operational capability. We evaluated each nation's forces, pledged capabilities. We visited each of the contributing nations and we proved that the forces are there. And indeed, like I mentioned, some have even been deployed. So there is nothing like testing the hypothesis because it has been tested. The forces are there, the forces are ready to respond. It is only the political will of the member states to accept an intervention when and if the need arises. That is the only scenario in which our forces will be requested to exercise themselves in a real scenario. But in regard to testing our forces, if they are able to do so, I think we have done that quite a lot through not only physical deployment of these standby forces within those states, but also through exercises that we have conducted in different countries, member states.
Among the countries you mentioned, the 10 countries, there's a notable absent, if I may say. There's Tanzania is not part of Eastern African Standby Force. It's part of SADC Standby Force. Yes. Now, people always compare. Compared to where SADC stands today, and we have seen SADC deploy in conflict situations, the most recent case being in DR Congo. Of course, speaking of Congo, Congo is also part of SADC. Where would you say you stand compared to the other regional organizations? And I've just given an example of SADC.
You gave a very good example of SADC, but deployed as SAMIM in Mozambique and SAMI DRC in DRC.
In DRC.
But we also deployed as ICRAF, because the member states of ICRAF are actually a number of them, just like SAMIM had just a number of them, not all of them. So it is important for people to actually get that logic.
But I thought, ICRAF deployed under the East African Community umbrella, isn't it?
It is okay. It can deploy under EAC because EAC is a smaller version of EASF. EASF is much wider. But because Tanzania was not involved, therefore, it's actually not EAC in its real sense of the word. I don't know if you get the logic. Because Tanzania is part of EAC. So the fact that Tanzania was not involved can only tell you that it is a combination of states rather than regional bodies. Okay? So, and I can tell you I've worked with the KDF in many ways in trying to get the materials together, because we are one entity really for the deployment of forces, and we can continue working with the African Union and any other organization before deployment, because we are all part of the African Standby Force. So it is important for people to understand that.
23 years later, of course, the the organization was set up in 2004. Now, today, we are talking of 22 years later. Is the region more stable? Is it safer? Do we see more security compared to the time before the Eastern African Standby Force was set up?
I would certainly say it is much safer. If we look at individual state stability, Rwanda, for instance, Rwanda is much safer than it was before. Not because of the EASF, but because of our collective support and engagements in bringing peace and stability. I told you that it's not just about intervention in times of conflict. Even the preventive measures, sharing intelligence, being able to understand each other's scenarios, working together, both as, by the way, we are a multidimensional force, working together as the military, police, and civilian components to create stability in the region through dialogue, through conferences, through continuous engagements as a region. I think we have, I can say to a large extent that we have created stability. And like I mentioned, for Burundi, Kenya, Uganda to engage in bringing stability to Somalia, even if there are instances where it is sometimes there is a recurrence of conflict. But we must say to a large extent that our individual states combined have created stability in the region. Then for Sudan, it goes without saying that we participated in different ways as individual states in bringing stability to Darfur, South Sudan, which by the way is...
And speaking of Darfur, I think it was in 2004 that Rwanda first deployed peacekeepers outside of
in the same year
that specifically in Darfur, in the same year that the Eastern African Standby Force came into existence. Okay.
So when people say that we have not seen the EASF in action, and then they say, but we have seen SADC in action, but they forget that SADC was just South Africa, Malawi, and Tanzania. The same way that Somalia has Uganda, Kenya, Burundi, and Ethiopia.
Yeah, I think that comes about because people will say, okay, which organ sanctioned this deployment? I think it was more from that perspective, but I get your point, General. Maybe if we could pivot a little bit and talk about those components, the three components. Of course, you work as a team from across these regional member states. Do issues of disputes and tensions between member states sometimes spill over into the team, the secretariat, and how do you go about that? How do you navigate those challenges? Because I know Rwanda is heading the military component through you for 3 years, if I'm not wrong, and then Burundi, I think, is going to be heading the police component, if I'm not mistaken again. And as you know, Rwanda and Burundi are not having the best of times in terms of their diplomatic...
To correct you, yes. The force commander is Kenya. Me, I'm actually above all those components you're talking about. I run the military, the police, and the civilian components.
And the civilian, okay. So thank you for the correction, yes.
And I report to the Council of Ministers. The Council of Ministers of the 9 states. Of course, plus the committee of CDFs. So, so the military component is run by Kenya. The police component is run by
Burundi.
By Burundi. And the civilian component has a Ugandan lady.
But still, I will come back to the same question. How do disputes and tensions between individual countries affect or possibly even spill over into how you work as a team? Or how it is likely to slow progress?
Surprisingly, this organization has not been affected in any way by the conflicts between individual states. And I think we have resolved most of them along the way without necessarily involving the regional organization. For instance, a couple of years ago, we had border issues with Uganda. And then, the problems were solved. I remember I had closed borders and things like that. But we did not in any way halt the cooperation at regional level in the East African Standby Force. We continued pledging our forces and participating in collective security initiatives. Same with Burundi. It has been quite consistent. Both countries have been quite consistent in, participating in both military, police, and civilian engagements. And like I said, our readiness has never been put to question throughout our 23 years of existence. We have always been united for a collective purpose.
It is correct that the organization was set up in 2004 as part of 5 regional frameworks to kind of improve security situation and improve a state of readiness for rapid response and all across the continent. But then sometimes you have a situation where, to take an example, let's say of Rwanda and even Uganda, I'm sure even Burundi has had those complaints, that their security challenges primarily emanating from Congo, Eastern Congo, DR Congo, which DR Congo is not part of the Eastern African Standby Force as an organization. It belongs elsewhere. How does that complicate your engagement and potentially your deployment if you have to, where security threats are coming from outside the region? Yeah.
First of all, we are engaged through various mechanisms. For instance, the African Union has provided financial support in carrying out fact-finding missions in the countries that are affected by the Congo War. We carried out a fact-finding mission as the EASF, and we have delivered our report to the African Union, and our proposals are listened to. So our engagement, you see, we always think about intervention, but we also have preventive diplomacy as one of our mandates. So in finding solutions, preventive diplomacy.
Yeah, what are some of the findings, or what are some of the recommendations, key recommendations you made in that regard to the African Union?
Most of what has been recommended actually is not new. It's important to look at the root causes of the conflict, because spillovers of these, the effects of these conflicts often affect these countries. For instance, the refugee crisis that we mentioned, that has affected communities, Kinyarwanda-speaking communities. This was something we identified and which has often been mentioned by many, an organization that has done research. And the countries' failure to recognize the legitimacy of communities along the border has created conflict. If you look at the refugee crisis of the Kinyarwanda-speaking communities in Rwanda, Burundi, and Uganda, it is enormous. Over 100,000 people have fled conflict. So when we identify that as a cause, we inform the African Union, say, we need to identify migrational issues. What is the cause of this exodus of communities? They are being persecuted for their religion, for their ethnicity, in some instances for religion, but in our case, in the case of DRC, it is strictly because of their ethnicity and their relationship to border countries, and that is the core issue. If that can be dealt with, of course, with the always mention the problem of the FDLR, remnants of the FDLR who have been causing mayhem in the Eastern African region.
The military responsible for the genocide in Rwanda.
In Rwanda. So those are some of the issues that we raised in our report. And of course, I don't think it was new to the African Union.
Do you think there is enough political will to allow for even collaborations between 2 regional security organs, like I said, let's say SADC and the Eastern African Standby Force, and maybe even with more across the continent? Is there an opportunity for collaboration? Because speaking of the context that, pertains within DR Congo, eastern regions of DR Congo, we have not seen that collaboration really bearing fruit. In fact, when SADC deployed, it was replacing aircraft, which was coming from member states under Eastern African Standby Force framework. You get a sense that there's no political will to actually have these organizations speak to one another, engage, coordinate for the bigger ultimate objective, which is a safer Africa.
I think if I remember very well, at the conclusion of the M23 capture of Goma and Bukavu, I think there was an agreement that Nairobi and Rwanda processes need to be combined. And I think that was what was done. That was the general consensus. But beyond that, of course, there were other initiatives that were put in place. The Washington Agreement, so we have to take that also into context, as well as the Doha for the internal management of issues in the DRC. Now, when all those four processes are put together, we would be unfair to say that we have not tried. We have tried as two regional bodies through the Rwanda and Nairobi processes. We have gone beyond that to include the Doha process as well as the Washington process. So we are waiting for people to meet their part of the bargain. And I think the agreements were very clear.
So let's say that probably EASF is probably playing a role behind the curtains. I'm sure, just like so many other actors. Absolutely. Yeah, but now let's.
If you talk of EASF, you are talking about the summation of individual countries. And here, in that whole equation, we have Rwanda, we have Burundi, we have Uganda. All these countries border DRC. So in one, Kenya, which deployed by the way in aircraft. So in one way or another, we are involved.
Not to take you or to cause you trouble, General. You mentioned Rwanda and then you mentioned Burundi, yeah. And we know that their positions are starkly different and opposing as you do. Basically, they are between day and night. That's how.
When it comes to regional integration, you have to work together to find solutions. And by the way, for your own information, there are many things that we have to agree upon, even if we disagree on certain principles. So whether we like it or not, we are in the region together, and we have to work together. So whatever transpires between nations, as professional forces, we need to go beyond the political issues between nations and work as professionals in the military field, and that's what I believe in. So there is no trouble on that. There is no confusion between political issues and professional issues. When you are a soldier and you are serving, when you are a soldier, you should go beyond those issues and try to serve the region in a very objective way.
To even use the same examples, Rwanda and Burundi have both served under the UN peacekeeping framework force in Central Africa, for instance, MINUSCA. Yeah, so, all right, now let's talk about the concept of peacekeeping and, of course, the how controversial it has become and how people feel like it's not really serving the purpose, where you have a peacekeeping force lasting 20 years in one place, taking billions of dollars in budget, and at the end of the day, there's no real impact on the ground for the people to really see change in their everyday experiences. How are you approaching this challenge of redefining or making sense of peacekeeping as a concept, international concept today, and how do you intend to make it work for our region?
That's a very good question. I always stated in previous engagements with the media, having been a spokesperson, that whenever multi-dimensional and multinational entities are told to carry out an operation, definitely there will be a lot of political bickering and political disagreements. The more the people, the less likely they are to operate in unison. The fewer the engagers or the engagement, I think often the better. That's why bilateral interventions have succeeded in Mozambique, in Central African Republic, and elsewhere, because there are less political consultations or agreements between nations, and therefore there is always a gap when you have many players involved. I think that's a simple logic. But wherever we have deployed as UN peacekeepers, the individual state also matters. The seriousness with which you operate matters. At least, in my experience as a person who witnessed our forces wherever they operated, the proof was basically in the pudding. They had, the public had great confidence in our forces wherever they deployed. So it also matters how doctrinally, how a force is structured, as well as the leadership model that a force is oriented. And therefore, our forces, at least I have to speak on behalf of the forces that operated, my forces, our forces that operated, they met the objectives in South Sudan, in Darfur, and in Central African Republic. They protected the MSRs, main supply routes. They protected civilians wherever they were called upon. And even the bilateral forces themselves were quite committed. So I wouldn't want to generalize the failure.
That's the Rwanda Defence Force.
Yes, I wouldn't want to generalize failure. And I believe even the UPDF has done its work in Somalia, or even many others. Even the Ethiopian Defence Forces. So I wouldn't want to generalize failure. It can happen with one country, but not necessarily the entire system. So yeah, so we are as good as our individual parts.
Area, some of these experiences are building blocks in the long run for EASF. Let me talk about the issue of funding. What is your funding model like? How sustainable is it? Because that's one of the problems that these organizations usually face also. Yeah.
Multinational organizations often face the issue of challenges, but I think we have done a lot as a region to try and get out of that dependency on external funding. We have been taking steps in increasing our funding. I want to tell you that I attended recently an African Union Executive Council, and I was surprised that Africans took decisions, tough decisions, to increase from tier 2 to tier 1. Ethiopia and Kenya increased their contribution to $18 million each. That is a step in the right direction. So we are finding African solutions to African problems through individual initiative, individual state initiatives. So I believe with our commitment, our collective commitment, even in the region, we have had member states increasing their support in different ways. I give you an example. Now we have the 7th scenario, which is humanitarian assistance and disaster support. I can tell you that Ethiopia has pledged strategic airlift assets. These are C-31s. These are big, big planes ready to transport people in the event that there is a disaster somewhere. Rwanda has pledged medical evacuation for victims that are caught up in a humanitarian crisis. Kenya has pledged air reconnaissance. And hopefully Uganda, we are looking forward to that in the coming days, will also pledge search and rescue operations. Now, what am I trying to say? Beyond the pledged capabilities of troops and equipment to respond to a given crisis, these countries have added other assets. Now, before, we were entirely dependent on the African Union and the European Union supporting the African Union in order for us to be able to operate. Today, there is a tendency in our small but very determined way, we are ready to operate even without that external support. I am actually on my way to Kampala for the policy organs meeting, and one of the things we are supposed to do is to evaluate the forces there, the readiness of the forces there, to see if they are ready to respond in the event of a crisis. And so we'll go with the force verification team to see how ready their forces are, and to also meet the leadership there to see if we can get more support for the standby force in terms of resources. Physical.
We'll come back to that, of course, a bit later. But let's explore a little bit more about, again, around the concept of peacekeeping. There's a debate as to whether you can actually successfully deploy a peacekeeping force in a place where there is no peace, or whether you should actually now talk of creating peace before you can talk of keeping that peace. What is your approach to that?
It is, of course, complicated because you have to ensure the United Nations has to be involved when it comes to scenario, the Chapter 7, which is that scenario where we have to intervene with the force. And usually we request the host nation to accept our forces to go there, which requires negotiation. But in the scenarios of genocide and mass atrocities, and once a resolution is passed by the United Nations, then as the region or as the African Union, of course here the African Standby Force or the African Union itself must pronounce itself and decide that an enforcement is necessary to bring stability to a given scenario. We haven't reached that point. Yet. Since the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi, where UN failed miserably. We haven't reached that point again, but we hope that we don't get there again.
I think you're correct, of course, saying that we haven't reached there yet, because also now that's the responsibility to protect doctrine, right? And I think the challenge is that what people will be saying is that it will always, that in itself, that decision is at the mercy of the powerful nations with their own interests to protect or to pursue. And then such interventions will always be at the whims of such interests, geopolitical interests and all. And I think we're not short of examples in our own region. Do you think we are anywhere close to that? If especially you're talking of the UN getting involved, AU getting involved, for an East African standby force to intervene in a small neighborhood next door or within their own member states' architecture, that's going to be a challenge, General.
For you to be able to negate all the processes of negotiation with the nation, because there is the issue of national sovereignty. For you to negate that part, you need authorization from bodies beyond the region, which is the AU and the UN. For you to say, I'm going into a country X with force, overwhelming force, there has to be authority from an entity beyond the region. That is very clear. Because
territorial integrity and
it involves violating. Yes, it involves violating the national sovereignty and integrity of the nation. because you are using force, you are enforcing the law. So it's natural. Don't expect anything less. People will have to make UN resolutions before forces are positioned to intervene.
Other technical experts in the space of security, peace and security architecture, do you get frustrated that the politicians are not doing their job? And this gets to affect your effectiveness?
I mean, it's a reality. It's not always going to be easy. We didn't expect it to be an open playing ground. It is about consistency, it's about mediation, it's about continuous diplomatic efforts. We don't give up. And I think that's one thing about servicemen. We must try all means possible to avoid the escalation of conflict. So we have all these cards in front of us. We don't get frustrated. Otherwise, frustration will only lead to, failure. We cannot give up. We have both soft and hard approaches. We must begin with diplomatic efforts, preventive diplomacy, and then we move on to mediation. Mediation, we have a panel of elders. I don't know if you know that we have a panel of elders in our EASF who are involved in mediation to avert conflict. So there are many measures within the toolbox, both soft and hard approaches. So we need to apply both soft and hard approaches first before we give up. So it is natural for us to engage through diplomacy, as well as, of course, as a last resort, engage with force if the need arises.
Okay, I think that's fair enough. Let me come back to what you consider to be the most pressing challenges today in the sub-region, across the EASF region. What do you consider to be the most pressing security challenges, and how are you approaching dealing with them?
The most pressing challenges are still terrorism and cross-border crime. Those are the biggest challenges in the region, and I guess working together is necessary to deal with, for instance, the issue of these Islamic groups that have caused havoc. There is also the Al-Shabaab in the eastern coast, which tends to bring instability along the seas, which affects in one another the flow of goods and services in the region. So we need to work both in the maritime security domain as well as between nations, international policing between nations, to be able to deal with cross-border crime. And we also have issues of cyber security threats, because that one it's very difficult to control on your own. It's important for us to work with different nations to deal with such threats. So those are the basic issues that we are facing as a region.
Yeah, and to deal with these issues, General, I think you would agree with me that you need to work together as individual countries, as individual regions, because these are threats that cross borders. Sometimes we've seen situations where you get a sense that maybe, these regions, instead of cooperating, or these countries, instead of working together, collaborating to deal with these threats, there are tendencies of competing with one another. Would that be correct assessment from where you sit?
Competition idea is not a bad thing if you can compete for the right reasons. But I think it is only if a nation is not well intentioned to work with another. I think that's when it can be a problem. But naturally, working together helps to deal with all the gray areas, the blind spots along the border. And I think for countries that have worked together, look at the relationship we have with Tanzania, the joint engagements we have had with Tanzania along the border. Look at our joint engagements with Uganda to curb crime along the border. I think you have seen the good engagements that we have had. Our defense forces along the border working with the Ugandan Defence Forces, same with the Tanzania. Those are very, very important engagements in trying to deal with cross-border crime and other acts of, of insecurity that are likely to cross the border. Yeah. So it's really not a competitive issue. It should be an issue of goodwill and good neighborliness. And for sure, wherever we have done it, it has really worked very well. Even with DRC, we had, I don't know if you know, we had Umoja Wetu at some point, where we worked side by side with the DRC, to deal with the issue of these groups that affect the security of our country and vice versa. But when it stopped, that's when things started going, out of hand. So I think working together is very important. Yeah. And we can give such examples to show how important it is for us to work together.
Yeah. General, do you see a situation where a stronger, let's say, East African community, a stronger SADC, strong COMESA, stronger IGAD, and these blocks working together, deepening integration, do you see that as a good platform to enhance security and safety and cooperation in those areas across these regions? Because there are serious issues also in the integration space.
Absolutely. Regional integration and security cooperation go hand in hand. They go hand in hand. You cannot separate the two. Because if something affects the flow of goods and services from one country to another, it is going to affect both sides. It's not just the one-sided issue. Because taxation will be affected. The economic engine that runs both countries will be frustrated. And so it is important to work together. It is a win-win situation when it comes to dealing with these crimes, cross-border crimes. Yeah. So I believe the regional bodies have to have an economic line of effort, a military line of effort, and a political line of effort. So the military line of effort is very critical. The military and police line of effort is very important in creating stability. And actually it affects the economies of both countries. So you negate the military line of effort at your own peril.
Now, you'll be in Kampala this week, of course, for that exercise that you hinted at earlier, which is, you'll be verifying the force verification exercise for the force in Uganda. How significant is it? How significant is that mission or is that exercise to your operational readiness of the Eastern African Standby Force?
It is a requirement for us to check the pledged capabilities of all the member states. So every country has pledged both troops and equipment to the standby force. So the role of the Secretariat and its structures, that is the force commander and the police component commander, the police component and the civilian component, is to check each of the nations' pledges in those three realms to see how ready they are and how effective they are in relation to the pledged capabilities. So we shall do that in Uganda, and we have done it in several other countries, member states. So we have a schedule to check the pledged capabilities and a tick. We have a checklist to verify the readiness of the forces, such that when the need arises for us to engage these forces, when they are ready, we will prove that they are ready for intervention.
Yeah. As we close to the end of our conversation, General, again, before we leave actually Kampala, while in Kampala, there will be also a series of meetings actually, the 36th policy organs meetings. So the meetings will bring together, of course, military experts, bring together obviously police experts and other experts, other technocrats in that space, but also defense chiefs and then ministers for defense from across the member states. Looking forward, what do you expect to be the key outcomes from that meeting? And of course, how will that improve you as an organization?
Well, thank you very much. You know, these meetings happen annually. I mean, 2 times biannually. That is mid-year and at the end of the year. And the purpose of these meetings is to review our operations, our activities, and to request for specific decisions to be made in regard to resource mobilization, in regard to our daily engagements, that is training, decisions on training, decisions on operability, decisions on major exercises that are going to be conducted between our nations, our respective member states. So that is the opportunity to review our regulations, our modus operandi, and come up with policies on the way forward to improve the organization. So these meetings are very critical in driving change and productive engagements for the organization. So we hope that in Kampala we'll be able to come up with some solid strategies moving forward. One thing that I will mention is that we are changing towards being more prepared towards dealing with crisis and crisis different scenarios, especially humanitarian assistance and disaster support. It would be unfair and for us to fail to intervene in an event, for instance, that country X has been faced with a major catastrophe. Even when we don't need political negotiations for approval, our readiness to respond to support a member state in a natural disaster would be unfortunate. And that is why we have to be ready to respond as a region to emerging crisis among our member states.
So, General, as you embark on this 12 duty in Nairobi, of course, serving the region, the Eastern African region, where do you envision this organization to be at the end of your term, your mandate? Do you see a region that is more cohesive, that's working more closely, collaborating more closely, that shows more solidarity than what we have seen in recent years? What do you envisage 3 years from now?
I'm very confident that this organization is going to be more united and more cohesive in engaging together to solve especially issues to do with the humanitarian and disaster support. You know, I come with experience where I have seen nations that have supported each other in bringing stability in scenarios where there is a crisis. And so I believe that as a region we can do much more than has been done before to bring stability in an area. For instance, if we had an earthquake, you saw what happened in Venezuela. The readiness of a nation to deal with an earthquake is not easy. One nation on its own, it's not easy. But as a collective region, when Ethiopia provides C-31 services that brings specific equipment to support a nation X in a scenario X, if Rwanda brings its medvac, Uganda brings its rescue operation or rescue search and rescue equipment, I believe we can do a lot in saving the day for a given nation, and that is why, as a region, to have standby forces and standby assets to respond to emerging crises is critical. It's very critical. We should not just look at the enemy in the sense of forces, rebel forces. We should look at the enemy even with climate-related issues that could easily spiral out of order. And for a region to be unready for such scenarios is unfortunate. It's very unfortunate. And that is why we must work together to ensure that we can respond when the need arises.
Yeah, thank you, General. As we pivot towards the end of our conversation, let me ask you one curious question, and this concerns the visibility of Eastern African Standby Force. Is it intentional? Is it on purpose that out there people don't even know about this force, and all the good things that you're doing? Is it that you haven't reached that point of coming out, to say, this is what we are doing, this is who we are, this is how you should get involved? People think probably you are just the military, but there is police, there is civilians, there is everyone's role to make this organization really succeed. Am I correct to say that there is not so much out there in public domain in terms of visibility and engaging the public around your mission?
Well, first of all, we are taking the right step in the right direction by having this interview, for instance. I have scanned through
and thank you so much, yes,
the media, and I have not seen these conversations at the secretariat level. And therefore, my answer to your question is that we are taking steps in that direction to ensure that we improve our communication strategy, engage with different media bodies to explain our roles, our mission, our challenges to member states through the media, because it is important that people understand what we do and what we stand for in the region. So once this is properly explained, then there will be less questions asked in the future. So I think we have started this, and I think we shall keep improving.
Yeah, and I appreciate this opportunity, General. Now, let's talk about your time at the RDF as the spokesperson. What was your experience like?
Well, it was one of the most interesting jobs that I've ever done in my entire career. I think working for the president was the one most challenging job, because I needed to be alert all the time. I was head of intelligence for over 10 years, so I was supposed to be alert throughout. And my next most challenging job was being a spokesperson, because everything you say has strategic ramifications. The moment you say it in a way that is not well thought out, it can have consequences. So I had to measure my words. I had to do a lot of research. I served for 6 years, and I believe it was a challenging job, but it also had its very good times. The exposure that I had, going to all our missions, Cabo Delgado, Central African Republic, South Sudan, engaging with the community outreach programs, medical outreach programs, our history. We built a very nice team in which we reviewed our history, which was also part of my portfolio. And I think it was a journey worth taking. And it has helped me to do what I'm doing today.
Is there such a thing as private life for a general? Did you enjoy your private life?
Of course, you have to fix time.
Serving at that high level in the military?
Oh yes, you have to fix time for private life. You have to find time for your family. You have to find time, on the weekend, once in a while. to be able to engage with friends and family. There is private life. There is private life in the military. You have to find it. You have to find it. It's not easy, but you'll have to look for it.
And especially when we are talking about the need increasing of work-life balance.
Exactly. You have to look for that balance in order for you to have mental stability as well as, sanity. Yeah. So it's a requirement.
Serving in the RDF, General, for such a long time at such a high level, and also, of course, knowing the RDF and its reputation as highly disciplined army, military, that also rubs off you personally as an individual, your character, your personality changes, maybe significantly.
You learn a lot. You learn a lot at the higher level. Your strategic engagements, the speeches the guidance you receive from the higher leadership, as well as the numerous engagements we have with the commander-in-chief. It provides lessons for any general or any leader at strategic level. There's a lot you learn, and there's also bottom up, and so you also learn from your subordinates. A lot is learned from subordinates as well, and so it's a very good experience, I can assure you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, General, for this time. We really appreciate that you took your time to have this conversation with the New Times, of course, on the Context podcast, and the whole idea was to really get people to understand what is you're doing in Nairobi, your new role, and I hope with all that you have shared, we've learned a lot, we've understood a lot, and we wish you all the best, and we send warm greetings from Kigali, and looking forward to meeting next time you visit or when we're in Nairobi. And I want to thank our audience. Thank you so much for always following the Context, and that which you can access across different platforms, Spotify and other platforms as well. Please do engage with our content. Do engage, do participate in this conversation in the comment section. Give us your feedback. What do you think? And also maybe who would you rather we host it next time? And the conversation, of course, continues. Thank you so much, General, and we wish you and your team all the best in Nairobi.
Thank you very much, and have a good stay in Kigali.
Thank you.
Asante sana.
Thank you so much. Appreciate. Yeah.